CM Punk has been back on AEW television for 2 months now. Right? He missed 9 months. Back on TV now for 2 months. And it looked like he was on his best behavior. He took a few not so subtle shots at people in his first promo back, but I can almost understand it. You know, he was trying to address it in a way without directly addressing certain people and whatever. That wasn't really a big deal. But he's been largely on his best behavior. He's working with his friends. He's tagging with FTR. We heard he wanted to work with Samoa Joe. He got to work with Samoa Joe. We heard that he had taken a liking to Jay White. He got to work with Bullet Club Gold. He worked with Ricky Starks. He even put him over in the Owen Hart tournament. He has made Collision his show. And Collision has been pretty consistently the best of all the weekly wrestling shows. So clearly, it was time to stir up a hornet's nest again for no reason at all and get people talking about AEW in the worst possible way. We know the issues with him and the Elite, and that the Elite, and more specifically the Young Bucks, they don't want anything to do with this guy. They don't want to work with him. They don't even want to sit down and have a conversation with him. And it has to be eating away at him. They were in North Carolina last Saturday, which is Hangman country, right? I knew that because the signs in the crowd told me so. And when the show was over, CM Punk decided to take the microphone and address the live crowd. And I talked about this already last weekend, but humor me for a second because it's worth reminding people what he said before I get into all this other stuff. He said, "Earlier today I went to a local supermarket and I figured out why they call him Hangman. It's because the pegs in the toy aisle are full of Hangman action figures because nobody wants to buy them. He's a peg warmer, unlike me who moves merchandise and pops ratings and sells toys. And then everybody in AEW is saying, I'm the heart, I'm the soul, I'm the spirit. Well, that's objective." So that was the gist of what he said. And the heart and soul stuff, that's something that other talent like Matt Hardy have said before in reference to the Elite being the heart and soul of that company. I mean, it's in the name of the company, right? It's called All Elite Wrestling. Obviously, they're part of the fabric of that company. But I saw the video last week and heard the comments, and I was perplexed by this entire thing because I just could not wrap my head around why he would reignite a fire that had largely been put out months ago. Now, it was still smoldering, but it was largely contained. Everyone is sworn to secrecy by non-disclosure agreements, everyone except for Hangman, since he wasn't there when the Brawl Out stuff went down. Tony Khan has not said anything about it since it happened. I wouldn't want to either if I was at least partially responsible for the entire thing. And since it was the most embarrassing thing to ever happen to my company, I wouldn't want to talk about it either. But when I said that Tony Khan should part company with CM Punk and not bring him back, and that's what I said after the Brawl Out stuff went down, there was a reason for that. It's not that I don't think Punk doesn't have something to contribute or that he doesn't do good business for them, but he took a dump on the company and he took a nice big old Chicago dump on his boss. And he felt that he couldn't trust the people he worked with. And if that's honestly how he feels, that he should not be working there anymore, if he can't trust a lot of the people that he works with. It was an unsustainable situation unless Tony Khan got everybody in a room together to hash things out like adults. Supposedly, Punk tried to make that happen. He apologized personally to Tony Khan for what happened. He wanted to try to make things right. The Bucks didn't care. They didn't. And they still don't want to meet with him or work with him or even look at his face. So Tony Khan's grand plan was to bring back CM Punk. Depending on who you believe, it may have also been the network. It may have been Warner Brothers Discovery that wanted Punk back also as part of the Collision launch. And so his great plan was to effectively split the roster, unofficially split the roster, to keep the Elite on one show and keep Punk on the other show. And keep them apart. It's unavoidable when you have pay-per-views and they're going to be in the same locker room, but from what I've read, like Forbidden Door and all that, they keep the Elite on one side of the building and Punk and his buddies on the far side of the building, opposite to wherever the Bucks are. I mean, it's ridiculous. Think about this. This is ridiculous. Just saying it out loud like that just makes it sound even worse. But that's effectively what he did here. Now, some of the names on Collision will bounce back and forth. They're on Dynamite as well. It's not like a hard and fast brand split. Darby Allin is an example of that. But for the most part, it feels like Collision has its own little roster, and Punk gets to work with the people that he likes. Everyone gets to stay in their lane, and the idea is that so long as they don't have to be around each other, he can stop the powder keg from exploding. And maybe, just maybe, one day, the ice will thaw, and maybe everybody can work together, and they can play off past issues, and they can pop ratings and buy rates, and they can sing Kumbaya. So that seemed to be Tony Khan's grand plan. But then Punk goes out and he does that. And it brings all of those bad feelings back to the surface and hits the reset button. And we're right back to square one again. With 1 week left to go until the biggest show in AEW history. This past week, it was once again mired in controversy, and at the center of that controversy, once again, was CM Punk. The only thing that made sense to me when I watched that video was that Punk and Hangman, they had agreed to work together. Maybe they would even have a match at All Out next month. He's got 2 pay-per-views he's got to build. Maybe they were going to promote something for All Out in Chicago with Punk and Hangman. That is not the case. Hangman Page had no idea that CM Punk was going to make those comments. We don't know what his reaction was. He may not give a shit. We don't know what his reaction was other than he was not told in advance about it because it was not planned. And the two of them are not working a program together. In fact, Punk sent Page a text message the next morning apologizing for the comments. And we don't know if they conversed or if Hangman sent a fucking little smiley emoji with the cowboy hat back. We don't know if there was any sort of actual interaction between the two, but Punk did text him an apology. Some people have said, what's the big deal? Everyone's so soft these days. He didn't say anything wrong. Well, here's the problem with that. Yes, you're right. If you look at the comments he made, it's actually pretty tame. He didn't say anything offensive. And if they were working together, man, that shit would be fair game. You cut promos on, yourself being a bigger box office attraction, however you want to phrase it. Hey, it's fair game to build to the match. But there is no match. Right now, Punk is already beefing on TV with a handful of different people. He's got issues with Ricky Starks. He's calling out MJF and referring to himself as the real world champion, walking around with an old belt. He's got a match next weekend at Wembley against Samoa Joe. In fact, Joe choked him out last Saturday at the end of the show, which led to his team losing to the House of Black. So then after the show, what does he do? He attacks Hangman Page. For what? What purpose does that serve? Now the reports are, it just came out wrong. He was only trying to be funny. It's like, it came out the wrong way. Like he went to fart and he shit himself by accident. It came out the wrong way. It shouldn't have come out at all. He knows he has unresolved issues with Hangman and his buddies. He buried them at the scrum. Then things got physical in the locker room. Not with Hangman, but with the rest of the elite. And he wants so badly to sit down with them and work things out that he goes out and does that? What does that say about the man's judgment that he thought that would help the situation? On Fightful, Sean Ross Sapp said Punk is telling people he wants to sit down with the elite, but they're refusing his request. Hangman, for his part, has been trying to steer clear of everything and just not get involved. And those close with the elite say that these types of situations make them want to distance themselves from Punk even more. It's not hard to see why. The man is a walking contradiction. Does he or does he not want to try to work things out? Because I fail to see how shit like this is going to make that any easier. The Bucks are not blameless in this either. I have said from the beginning that I think they do have a responsibility to at least sit down with CM Punk and hear what the man has to say. I understand that Nick Jackson supposedly was the one who got hit in the face with a flying chair and fists were thrown, and it was a very traumatizing thing for the Young Bucks. Yes, I saw the comments on the All Access show where they contemplated retirement and everything. I'm sure the whole thing was very traumatizing for them. But the reality is that even if they were assaulted in that whole melee there, and yes, they were the ones who went to Punk's dressing room that night, but I don't believe they went there looking for a fight. I don't believe that they went there looking to throw down. But that's how things escalated. and they were assaulted, or at least Nick Jackson was. He was the one, like I said, who took the chair to the eye. They walked in there with the company's head of legal. That hardly strikes me as two people fixing to throw fists. But it happened. And if they don't want to work with Punk, if they think he's an asshole, they have every right to feel that way. But they are not just talent. They are executive vice presidents. And my thing this entire time has been, and still is, now that they have signed new contracts and they're keeping their EVP titles, we know that. There's still EVPs in this company. My whole thing is that if you are an EVP, you have a responsibility to do whatever is necessary to keep the peace and keep things drama-free. You're no longer just looking out for yourself. You now have the responsibility of looking out for the entire company that you represent. Guess what? That's part of what comes with being an executive. Creating an entirely new show to throw Punk on there like he's banished to his own little island, that was always going to come back to haunt Tony Khan. I just didn't think it would blow up again 2 months in. I figured maybe 6 months, not 2. It's not sustainable. Something was inevitably going to happen. If the Young Bucks were just the Young Bucks on TV, then fine, don't meet with the man. I still think it probably would be wise, but fine, don't meet with the guy. But if they want to be EVPs, they have a responsibility to not only the company, but to Tony Khan, to put their personal feelings aside and just hear what the man has to say. Maybe you hear him out and then you're like, okay, cool, we heard him out. We still don't want to have anything to do with him. But yes, I do think they have a responsibility to at least meet with him. Get everybody together and hear him out. Punk found out this week that when you poke the bear and you piss off people who already don't like you and you give them a reason to come after you, they're going to come after you. Because the floodgates opened with all sorts of stories about backstage confrontations and people being banned from the building. The first story was that Hangman Page, who lives in the area where Collision took place last weekend, was sent away from the building when he got there to film a promo. He was supposed to film some sort of promo. Got to the building, and he was effectively banned from the building. He was told, you gotta leave, or we're going to film this somewhere else. You gotta leave. That is not the case, it appears. Mike Johnson of PW Insider says it was a case of the location of Hangman's promo being moved to a different place, and that it had zero to do with CM Punk. And that when Punk happened to make the comments he made after the show about Hangman, it gave people who don't like Punk the ammunition they were looking for to blame him for what happened. Hangman lives in the area, so it would make sense for him to be at the show and make an appearance in front of the live crowd, even if it was only off the air. So there was clearly a reason that somebody did not want him there. I don't believe this was all just one big fancy coincidence, and it's like, oh, Hangman, what are you doing here? Silly boy there. We're not filming that here. Oh, you thought we were filming that here? No, we're not filming that here. You gotta go down the road 15 minutes. We're supposed to film outside the fucking Jiffy Lube down the road. Bullshit. Even if it didn't come from Punk, and I can believe that. There was somebody in that company who said, oh boy, we probably shouldn't have these guys together in the building at the same time, so maybe let's just change things and we'll move the shooting location of this promo to somewhere else. I assume, by the way, the segment in question here, the segment they filmed, was the scene that we got on Dynamite on Wednesday of him in front of the ambulance after the Kenny Omega attack that they showed. So it's likely the scene had to be shot somewhere else in front of what looked like a hospital or some kind of medical center. But it wasn't a case where he traveled in for the show and got turned away and then sent back home. The same cannot be said for Ryan Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler's little brother. And also for Christopher Daniels, the head of talent relations for AEW. We'll start with Nemeth first. Ryan Nemeth, he got to the building last weekend for Collision and was told by AEW VP Pat Buck to head home shortly after he arrived. Now, this all stems from a tweet that Nemeth posted. I think he's since deactivated his Twitter. But he posted a tweet after Punk first came back. And in his promo, if you remember, Punk referred to the Young Bucks as the counterfeit Bucks. There was a reference to counterfeit Bucks in there. That was on the debut episode of Collision. Nemeth is very tight with the Young Bucks. He went on Twitter, he referred to Punk as, quote, literally the softest man alive, after Punk used the word soft in his promo in reference to the Elite, without actually naming them, because he spotted a sign in the crowd that he didn't like. Sound familiar? They had signs in the crowd last week for Hangman Country, and Hangman was right. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what led directly to these comments that he made after Collision, even if he was only joking. So the following week, when Punk appeared on Dynamite, this was right before Forbidden Door, Punk confronted Ryan Nemeth backstage about the tweet. And according to Wade Keller of the Pro Wrestling Torch, Punk cornered him in the locker room, and he got up only inches from his face, and he angrily asked if they had a problem or if they needed to go outside and settle things. Numerous wrestlers witnessed this, and they characterized it as awkward and weird. So think about this. Punk had been gone for 9 months or so at this point, and supposedly wanted very badly to come back and was trying to do the right thing and make amends. And if this story is to be believed, one of the first things he did when he came back was physically go up to somebody in the locker room, inches from their face, and say, hey, you got a problem with me? Let's go outside and take care of it. So Nemeth then moved the argument into the hallway, where Punk continued to berate him. And Nemeth defended himself in calling Punk soft, since it was Punk who fired the first shot against the Bucks in that promo. Punk pushed back and said the timing of the tweet was bad, and it worked against the public image that they were going for, that everybody was either on the same page, or at least they were not doing anything to exacerbate any prior issues, which, again, is hypocritical considering the Hangman comments. Nemeth then asked Punk if he shouldn't react to things that Punk says on TV anymore, and Punk said, yeah, that would be the right choice. Then they shook hands, and they parted ways, and Nemeth confided the incident in some friends of his backstage, and he asked how to handle the situation, because even he realizes up against CM Punk, he's got no power, he's got no leverage. Punk is a star, Nemeth is not. Nemeth has spent most of his time there on Dark and Dark Elevation. He's not exactly treated like a must-see attraction. So he decided to lay low because he didn't want to do anything to risk his job, which is totally understandable. So when he got to the building in Greensboro last weekend, he was told he was no longer needed, and he was given his flight itinerary to go back home. And the decision was made that he should only work Wednesdays from now on to avoid any issues with Punk. And Nemeth apparently thought whatever heat there was between the two of them was over after they shook hands back in June. Well, he thought wrong. Then there's Christopher Daniels, who is someone that you never hear associated with any type of locker room drama. He's not a troublemaker. He's well-liked. He's a veteran guy. But he is friends with the Young Bucks. And apparently he made it a point to avoid Punk when they were backstage together at Forbidden Door, when everybody was in the building together. Mike Johnson says it is 100% a situation where, since CM Punk's friend Ace Steel is not allowed to physically be present at Collision, Punk put his foot down and decided he doesn't want Daniels there either. With the idea that when Brawl Out happened, Daniels was on the Elite side of things. Now, I don't know if that means Daniels was physically involved in some way, maybe trying to, break things up, or if that just means he wasn't part of the Brawl Out per se, just that he's on the side of the Elite. That wasn't made entirely clear to me. I don't believe he was physically involved in that, but I don't know that either. But yes, I can understand in a way his line of thinking there. Not saying I agree with it, but in his mind, well, if my guy can't be there, then their guy can't be there either. Except Daniels didn't hurl a chair at someone's head and bite somebody on the fucking arm like they were corn on the cob. Big difference there. Voices of Wrestling on their Patreon, they've broken news about this stuff in the past. They claim that Punk himself told one of their sources that he is 100% the reason why Nemeth and Daniels were sent home. If you combine all of the nominees in the category for Best Drama at the Oscars, you still would not have as much drama as AEW has backstage. It truly is All Elite Elementary. This isn't even high school. This is embarrassing. Collision has been a great show, and I know CM Punk is important to Tony Khan's business plan, but how does he allow this man to effectively ban his head of talent relations from the building? Christopher Daniels is the head of talent relations for his company. He's in the same role that Jim Ross was in once upon a time in WWE. And Tony Schiavone is also kind of in right now in AEW. I don't know if he's the head, but Tony Schiavone does a lot of different things in AEW. But that's the role that Christopher Daniels is in, and CM Punk has the power to ban him from the building? But this shouldn't be surprising. This is the same Tony Khan who, according to Keller, when Punk first came back in June, stood up in the gorilla position with his headset on and started enthusiastically pumping his fist, chanting CM Punk as Punk walked by. It sounds almost unbelievable, but I could absolutely see Tony Khan doing something like that. He's a fan of these guys. He said that long before he ever got CM Punk, that Punk was at the top of his list of people he wanted to get for AEW. He's a fan of all these guys, but there is a time to be a fan and a time to be a boss. If he wants to pump his fist and chant CM Punk, he can find an open seat in the crowd and he could sit with the fans. But he should also be able to say, look, I hired this man to be our head of talent relations. I'll talk to him to make sure there aren't any issues, but he needs to be here. That is non-negotiable. And that hasn't happened. He seems content to placate this man no matter what. CM Punk apparently has EVP status in this company, just like the Elite does. He may not officially be recognized as one, but that's what he is. He is an EVP in this company. The inmates are running the asylum. Some people never learn the lessons of WCW. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. When Punk came back in June, he told Mark Raimondi of ESPN that the first thing he said to Tony Khan when the two of them sat down after Brawl Out was that he was sorry for putting him in that position. And here he is again on the eve of their biggest show, putting him in that same position. But now it is clear as day that Tony Khan is going along for the ride willingly. He is allowing this to happen. He has made a gamble that we need Collision to be a success, and in order for that to happen, we have to make CM Punk happy because the entire show is built around him, so this is what needs to be done. Getting the company's head of talent relations barred from the building, and other people, it's like Hulk Hogan using his creative control clause. I can't even blame Hogan for that, any more than I would blame Punk for this. I blame the person who gave him that power in the first place and lets him get away with it. In this case, that person would be Tony Khan. He is AEW's greatest asset and also its greatest liability. He has the power to fix this. Either that or wait for the next bomb to go off.